Well, look, the firing obviously was warranted.
Things got spicy out in Sin City.
Josh McDaniels has been canned.
Goodness. Here, ladies and
Goodness. Okay.
Very few times are decisions made in the middle of the night in Las Vegas that are rational.
It really did take Josh McDaniels to unite Broncos and Raiders fans, something none of us could have ever guessed. You got the McNugget, the McMuffin, and the Mick not gonna ever head coach again, Josh. Josh McDaniels kept his job longer when he was the Broncos head coach than he did when he was the Raiders head coach. 25 games with Vegas and a 9-16 record, 28 games with the Broncos with an 11-17 record, and somehow he never lost to the Broncos as the Raiders head coach. That just stings, but nothing compares to his 8-hour, 22-minute stint as head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. He was able to mess you up the least, Colts fans. Now let me begin by playing some of McDaniels' greatest hits as Raiders head coach. McDaniels blew 5 double-digit leads, failed to score 20 points in 9 of his last 10 games, lost to high school coach Jeff Saturday in his first ever NFL game, lost to D2 undrafted QB in his first ever NFL game, and of course lost to Baker Mayfield last season after Baker joined the Rams just 3 days prior. At least when the Broncos got torched by Baker, he had been there for a couple weeks. Today, I will recap this Josh McDaniels firing, this saga, and reveal how disgustingly similar his tenure with the Broncos was, which makes his hiring just even more unforgivable. (2021), the surprise firing / resignation of John Gruden left a massive void in Las Vegas that only one man could fill. Did you think I was gonna say that man was Josh McDaniels? Hell no, I'm talking about Richard Bisaccia, a guy who navigated a team that was dealing with an email scandal from their former head coach,
containing misogynistic, racist, and homophobic language.
I got my sucked by a friend of mine in a dream, and it was fucking crazy.
And DUI manslaughter charges from their standout young receiver. He navigated that team into the playoffs and went toe-to-toe with the eventual AFC champions on the road. A guy that hand-wrote thank you cards to every one of his players after the season. A guy who was beloved and succeeded in the face of real-life turmoil. And they canned him.
He's one of the greatest coaches I've ever been around. I love him to death. The dude, we still talk all the time.
Not only did they can him, they didn't even really consider him for the gig. Instead, they replaced him with one of the most universally disliked losers in NFL history. Hi. And I use loser quite literally. As a head coach, he's winning in life because he gets to go home and collect massive paychecks every week until his contract runs out. And by the way, he signed a 6-year contract and has over 4 years remaining. Mark Davis, the most cash-poor owner in the NFL, is now paying John Gruden and Josh McDaniels somewhere between $40 and $80 million to not coach his team. He gave Gruden a 10-year contract, McDaniels a 6-year contract, and I'm pretty sure the average standard contract for head coaches is 4 to 5, so he overshot both of them. But God, I really picked the wrong line of work, didn't I? And by line of work, I mean riding Bill Belichick's coattails. Or his sweatshirt tails, whichever.
Knock on wood if you're with me.
I am a Broncos fan, and I saw McDaniels implode a locker room, dismantle a young and upcoming team, alienate his best players, and get fired less than 2 seasons into his coaching tenure. And then it happened again. Who could have seen that coming except for all of us? This was me when the Raiders hired Josh McDaniels back when I looked like I still lived under a bridge. I needed to think about how I wanted to roast the Raiders for hiring the closest thing the NFL has to a terrorist. Personally, I'm betting he will fail again. Only the Raiders could beat a guy 59-14 and then say, that's our head coach. The biggest sign you may have made the wrong hire is that you landed the coach nobody else wanted to interview. We warned you. Mark Davis officially exorcised the spawn of Satan on Halloween of all days, firing Josh McDaniels, offensive coordinator Mike Lombardi, and GM Dave Ziegler after 25 games and a 9-16 record. When Raiders fans begged him to fire McDaniels, he told them to smarten up. Well, now he's the one who is smartened up. Or he's way too easily swayed by fan opinions, I don't know. As I mentioned, McDaniels is the first coach in NFL history to be fired before completing 2 full seasons, which is honestly as impressive as it is incompetent. And I'm actually upset they did it now, not just because they got rid of a coaching parasite, but because Denver will never get the chance to beat him. Of all the failures Nathaniel Hackett had as a head coach, and there were many, getting swept by Josh McDaniels might take the cake. Raiders legend Tim Brown tweeted, "A lot of things I don't say because I know my words carry weight, and the players can't say it because they are in the fire, but I felt like this was a repeat of the '94 season, when internally we knew we had a problem but couldn't say it publicly." The Raiders were 9-7 that year, so that doesn't sound nearly as bad, Tim. Former Giants linebacker and Raiders linebackers coach Antonio Pierce becomes the interim head coach.
In California, I was born a Raider. I was born with the Raiders rolling in the Coliseum in LA. I was rolling with NWA. That's pointed at your ass. Talking straight out of Compton, rocking Raider hats. I'm coming straight out of Compton. It's a new chapter, it's a new era, it's a new mindset. When I see the park pass, I smile. What is that mindset? Attitude legit, cause I'm tearing up shit. It's that of the Raider pride, the commitment to excellence, and making sure our alumni, our fan base, and Raider Nation are proud of what they see on the field.
That should be the standard. That should be the standard right there. Yep.
Antonio Pierce. Here's another guy I think we're all rooting for. I really like him. I like him for this role, and I think he can save the Raiders season. And Raiders fans can sleep well knowing that at the end of this season, once he turns it around, Mark Davis will still hire some other idiot. Champ Kelly is now an interim GM, and quarterbacks coach Bo Hardegree will step in as the offensive coordinator. There's also word that the Raiders are starting rookie QB Aiden O'Connell at quarterback, which they should have done a long time ago. Ian Rappaport asked a Raider source why they were making the change. That source said, "Because he's our best fucking quarterback." Well, maybe. If he was the best quarterback like he showed all preseason and in his lone start against the Chargers, he should have been on the field. Better late than never, though. With Josh McDaniels, it's always better late than never. And I have to applaud the Raiders for firing him faster than the Broncos did back in 2010. You beat us there. And if you're old enough to remember Josh McDaniels' tenure as the Broncos head coach in 2009 and 2010, you're also probably wondering how this man was hired, twice actually, as an NFL head coach following that debacle. Let us not forget that he agreed to coach the Indianapolis Colts before the 2018 season and left them hanging when he suddenly returned to New England, forcing Indy to settle for Frank Reich. Now, Mark Davis still thought it was a good idea to give McDaniels a third chance in 2022. I think I have an idea why that happened. Obviously, his second tenure as Pat's offensive coordinator gave rise to 3 more Super Bowl victories. I wasn't in the room for that interview, and I assume that room was in the back of a PF Chang's, but I'm guessing McDaniels talked a lot about how he had learned from his past failures in Denver and was ready to become a better head coach and leader in his second real go-round. Did Josh McDaniels learn his lesson? Is he a changed man? Or will being a power-hungry douche who wants to belittle people and get them to perform out of fear rise to the surface when things get tough?
You know, when I went to Denver, you know, I knew a little bit of football. I didn't really know people and how important that aspect of this process and maintaining the culture and building the team was. And I failed, and I didn't succeed at it. And so looking at that experience has been one of the best things in my life in terms of my overall growth as a person, as a coach.
I do think it's hilarious, though, that for McDaniels to succeed with the Raiders, he should probably carry himself like the guy Mark Davis just let go in Rich Bisaccia.
He's someone that invests in his players as men. He cares a lot about the person, not just the jersey number. He'll coach the jersey number hard, but he cares about the person on a just really incredible level.
I mean, he put his thoughts and emotions for every single player, which you don't get that a lot in a coach. And so, you know, Bisaccia was someone that we would run through a brick wall for.
In the middle of the 2011 NFL lockout, when McDaniels was preparing for a season as offensive coordinator for the St. Louis Rams, that didn't go well, by the way, he started an Excel spreadsheet that was titled Lessons Learned. He wrote down hundreds of lessons learned, with some of the big ones including things like be patient, not impulsive, clean up your language, and listen to others. Damn, if he would have only noted play your best quarterback, he might still have a job. Let's recap how those lessons played out in Las Vegas. Was he patient? Well, based on some of his game management decisions, yes, he was probably too patient.
Interesting decision here by McDaniels.
In a city funded by risk takers, he was the chain-smoking old lady quietly popping quarters into a slot machine for 36 straight hours. Yeah, she still uses actual quarters the way McDaniels still uses an antiquated offense. Or maybe he was just so conservative that he couldn't stomach the idea of starting a player whose initials are AOC. Did he clean up his language? Well, this leads me to believe that no, he did not. And did he listen to others? Based on everything we've gathered, it does not sound like it. It was the same old my way or the highway routine that got him canned the first time in Denver. The Derek Carr situation was an exact repeat of the Jay Cutler situation.
You know, once they made my wife cry, that was pretty much over.
But way worse, considering Derek Carr seems like a guy who is hard to not get along with. It's really impossible to ignore the parallels from his short time with the Broncos and his even shorter time in Las Vegas. He publicly shopped and eventually traded quarterback Jay Cutler, a 25-year-old QB coming off a Pro Bowl season, for Kyle Orton and a bunch of picks that he ended up squandering as the de facto GM.
It could have worked out. As I mentioned a week ago, was going to require a two-way commitment. And as Pat said, I just think that there was, it was clear to us that there wasn't going to be a two-way commitment.
Over a decade later, he ran Derek Carr out of the building, made his wife cry, and replaced him with handsome Kyle Orton, aka Jimmy Garoppolo, who threw 7 touchdowns and 9 interceptions this season. Sorry, that's not really fair to Jimmy. He replaced Carr with a devastatingly handsome, oh my God, I would just sit there and watch this perfect man fornicate my wife in ways I could never even dream about, Garoppolo. That's better. McDaniels phased out Eddie Royal from his offense in Denver and did the same to Hunter Renfrow, a former 1,000-yard receiver who's caught 10 passes for 92 yards through the first 7 games of this season. He also had a famously difficult relationship with wide receiver Brandon Marshall, one of the most underrated players of the last 15 years, and clearly did not get along with Devontae Adams. Adams joined the Raiders to play with his college QB Derek Carr and his friend, and now he's stuck in an offense that is scoring 15 points per game.
Josh McDaniels is definitely not suited to be a head coach. Absolutely not.
Why?
Because of what I talked about when we were talking about Jeff Saturday. Because he doesn't know how to lead people.
And then there's the holdout with Josh Jacobs, and the mystery of why the NFL's leading rusher just a season ago is averaging 3.1 yards per carry in 2023. Just yesterday, we learned that Josh Jacobs wanted to be traded to the Ravens, but the Raiders weren't willing to budge unless Baltimore gave them a second-round pick, which is a hardline stance for a player they were iffy about giving a contract to last offseason. Although perhaps they didn't make any trades yesterday because they were too busy firing their general manager. Maybe as a bad team, you should do that before the trade deadline. Just a thought. It's not just that McDaniels is a bad leader of men. He is. but he's also too rigid in his offensive philosophy. Good offensive minds find a way to fit talent into their scheme, while McDaniels showed that the scheme took precedence over his incumbent roster, shoehorning less talented players into an offense that has never been elite outside when it was being run by Tom Brady. Instead, McDaniels purged the Raiders' existing talent and replaced it with former Patriots Jimmy G, Jacoby Myers, Brian Hoyer, Brandon Bolden, defensive tackle Adam Butler, offensive tackle Justin Herron, fullback Jacob Johnson, and of course, coaching assistant Danny Amendola. He basically established Foxborough West in the desert, just like when he was here in Denver. Listen, the reason those guys were available is because the Patriots didn't need or want them. And that says a lot more this time because the Patriots are terrible. So what's next for Josh McDaniels? Well, he can do nothing if he wants and live like a king while Mark Davis cuts him checks with the same pair of scissors that he uses to cut his own hair. Or he can make another bullshit spreadsheet, although times have changed, so he'll probably be using Google Sheets instead of Excel. Or the most likely scenario is he'll return to New England in exactly 3 minutes and call plays for the Patriots. An especially alluring gig if they are in position to draft a top QB. The Broncos were fooled by Josh McDaniels and his 11-5 season with Matt Castle. The Raiders were fooled by a 10-7 playoff season with Mac Jones. Who's going to get fooled next time? Hopefully no one will, because fool me once, you can't get fooled again, as my favorite band, Led Zeppelin, once said. Don't get fooled again. Thanks for watching That's Good Sports. Please subscribe here on YouTube. Again, we did pass 500,000 subscribers, so now we gotta get to 1 million, guys. Can everybody subscribe twice? We'll get to 1 million real fast.